What's up, folks? We're back this weekend for another free card brought to you by the UFC. This is UFC Fight Night 96. Dodson versus Lineker live from Portland, Oregon this Saturday, October 1st. Should be a good one. Let's dive right in. The main event this week features two ranked bantamweights as number 10 John Dodson battles number 3 John Lineker. This is a battle of two guys who established themselves at flyweight. Dodson ultimately moved up from flyweight after two failed attempts to dethrone the number one pound-for-pound UFC flyweight champion Demetrius Johnson. For Lineker, he couldn't make the weight. 4 missed weight occurrences finally forced him to move up. The betting line's right now sitting at John Dodson, the -125 favorite, Lineker at -105. For Dodson, he's coming off his bantamweight debut at UFC on Fox 19, that was back in April in Tampa, absolutely starching Manny Gambarian. Just 37 seconds he needed to get that finish. The book on Dodson, he's extremely athletic, he's fast, and he's powerful for that size. He has 5 UFC finishes. I believe he walks around at 160 pounds. You wouldn't know it from his small stature, but packs a mighty punch. Dodson, been a veteran of Jackson Winklejohn MMA in Albuquerque, New Mexico, been a staple there for a long time. His opponent, Lineker, has absolutely come alive at this new weight class at 135. He has some incredible power for his small stature as well, only 5'3". Coming off 3 straight wins, knockout of Francisco Rivera, that was back in September of 2015. Decision of Rob Font, that was back in May at UFC 198. And then a main event TKO finish of Michael Mayday McDonald. That was in Sioux Falls this past July at UFC Fight Night 92. Lineker been on a roll. This is a clash here. Someone's going to have their momentum halted. It's a very intriguing fight. Lineker, we know, can end the night with one punch. We've seen it. But so can Dodson. And I expect Dodson in this fight to use his quickness and footwork. He's going to really outwork Lineker on the feet. And he could even take it to the ground. I do think Dodson can catch him with a big shot and put him away. Lineker can certainly catch Dodson as well and put him away. My prediction, though, I think John Dodson's going to land that shot at some point. I'm going to go ahead and set Dodson by KO, TKO round 3, and his quickness and tenacity after he lands that shot and has that killer instinct will ultimately be too much and the fight will be stopped. The co-main event of this card, Will Brooks, the number 11 ranked lightweight in the world, taking on Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Brooks is the former Bellator lightweight champion. He came off his UFC debut, unanimous decision victory over Ross Pearson. That was back in July at the Ultimate Fighter 23 finale. That was a fight he took on short notice, and I believe it did show in his performance. Oliveira, on the other hand, has won 4 of 5. His one last loss coming to the American Cowboy, Donald Cerrone. His last fight, a very lopsided decision victory over James Moontazeri. That was back in Chicago in July at UFC on Fox 20. One thing that's interesting is Cowboy did his fight camp for that fight against Moontazeri at American Top Team. And Eve Edwards this past week on the MMA Roasted podcast said that that's not the first time he's done a camp there. He has done multiple fight camps there. And that's interesting because the Will Brooks main camp is American Top Team in Florida. So interesting to see that perhaps this could be a battle of former teammates here. A lot of people are writing off Cowboy for this fight. A lot of people saying that it could be Will Brooks' coming out party, think that's an easy fight for him. But me personally, I wouldn't write off Cowboy too quickly. He's extremely tough. He's well-rounded. He's big for the weight class. We know he's toggled back and forth between welterweight and lightweight. Cowboy can win this fight. I think in order to do so, he really needs to make it dirty, though. Really get in the grind, get it a dogfight, make Brooks brawl, and not use his technical advantage or speed advantage. For Brooks, I think he really needs to leverage his wrestling here. Take Cowboy to the ground and use his superior top pressure, ground and pound. If the opening for a submission presents itself, he can take it. I'm going to predict Brooks here by unanimous decision, but do not be surprised, folks, if Cowboy scores the upset. Betting lines there, Will Brooks -230 favorite. Oliveira, the comeback, is +210. Like I said, safe bet is on Brooks, but don't be surprised. Cowboy could shock you. Another bout on the main card. Lightweights Josh Burkman battles the UFC newcomer Zach Ottow. This fight was originally scheduled for Burkman to collide with Bobby Green. Ottow coming in on late notice, although he did have a fight in the Legacy Fighting Championships promotion on tap for next weekend, so was already in fight camp in preparation for this one. For Josh Burkman, this is his second UFC stint. He is very well traveled. We know he's the former World Series of Fighting welterweight champion. He's fought some of the best the game has to offer, both inside and outside the UFC. This stint has not been kind to him, though. He won 1-3 with one no contest, but those losses all coming to very strong competition. Patrick Cote, Jung Kim. The no contest was to Hector Lombard. This past May at UFC Fight Night 88, decision loss to Paul Felder, so coming in off a loss here. For Ottow, I personally don't know too much about the guy. He's 13-3. He fights out of Wisconsin. Many wins by way of submission. My prediction, though, I'm going to have to give the edge to Burkman, and here's why. I think he's a lot better fighter than his recent performances suggest. We've seen him with flashes of greatness, both inside and outside the UFC. Burkman, I think, will be able to use his striking to outpoint Ottow. He's the minus 230 favorite right now. Ottow's sitting at a comeback of plus 180. I really feel strongly I think Burkman's going to run through this guy. When he's faced guys that are inferior to him, we really showcase his skills. This is a fight where I think Burkman can shine inside the octagon, and I think his job may be on the line as well. Feeling that pressure, I like Josh Burkman in this, and I would definitely include him on any parlay bets you might want to put down for the fight card. And rounding out the main card, we have a flyweight contest between the number 9 ranked flyweight Louis Smolka taking on the newcomer from The Ultimate Fighter Season 24, Brandon Moreno. Smolka currently sitting at 9th in the rankings. He is nearly a 4-1 favorite over the newcomer Moreno. Moreno replaces Sergio Pettis, who pulled out of the fight last week, and actually quite a bit of comedy and controversy over that, as Smolka sent out an Instagram video autographing a box of tampons, criticizing Sergio Pettis, saying he had an injured vagina. Regardless, this is definitely a tough test. Smolka is on an extremely impressive run. He has 4 straight wins with 3 finishes. Paddy Holohan, Ben Nguyen back in Sioux Falls at UFC Fight Night 92. It seems like Smolka's really putting it all together here. He has a very strong game, but I think where he shines most is in top control. We've seen him with good transitions from the guard to the mount, side control, taking the back, and really using overwhelming ground and pound. And with that good gas tank, he's able to go deep into rounds and constantly barrage his opponents with those strikes. That's what we saw to Win. It's what we saw to Neil Seery. It's what we saw to Holohan. Moreno comes to the UFC by way of The Ultimate Fighter Season 24. He is the WFF Flyweight Champion. That is a highly respected regional promotion out of Arizona. He's a training partner to the UFC number 2 ranked flyweight Henry Cejudo. On the show, we saw he was the very first fight of the season. He lost his first fight to number 1 seed Alexandre Pantoja. Showed very strong toughness, but still very green in the sport. Definitely a lot of potential. He's young. Definitely an opportunity here that he had to jump on because there was no guarantee he was going to get a fight at that Ultimate Fighter 24 finale. I'm honestly kind of surprised here that the UFC would throw in a young guy like Moreno rather than one of the more experienced tough competitors, Ultimate Fighter competitors that are on the show that are already eliminated. Smolka, he really should win this easily. I do expect Moreno to absolutely go for broke. He has nothing to lose in this fight. He might as well. He's getting an opportunity in the UFC. I think Moreno will be able to keep it on the feet, at least for the greater part of round 1. But once this hits the mat, I really like Smolka here. He's really shown some great transition game, a great top control, just great smooth overall flow on the ground. And for Smolka, once he gets that position of control, I think he's going to rain down bombs, ultimately snatch up a submission perhaps. But Smolka all day. Not a great betting line here, but similar to Burkman, I would include Smolka in any parlay bet. The featured prelim on Fox Sports 2 for this week is a light heavyweight showdown between Luis Henrique da Silva taking on the UFC newcomer Joachim Christensen. Should be a good clash here. Henrique da Silva, also known as Frankenstein, and I've even actually seen him referred to as Frank Waston before in the past. He is coming off a really impressive performance. That was a TKO of Johnny Bravo Wilson back at UFC 199, a fight where he took lots of big shots in the first, and Wilson is not a small man. He can dish him out, but hung in there, stayed tough, ate the shots, and came back and outlasted the slugger Wilson. Just poured it on in the second round, got that TKO finish. Christensen, he's 13-3. He's a highly touted prospect out of Denmark. And, well, I say that word prospect lightly because he is 37 years old. He's beaten a lot of top prospects in Europe, though. Guys like Jonas Bilstein, Max Nunes, Steven Putz, to name a few. Very impressive run as of late. It's a tough fight to call. Christensen, probably the more technically sound fighter. I'd give the edge in cardio. I'd give the edge in toughness and durability to Henrique de Silva. Currently, the betting odds sit at de Silva at -150. The comeback on Joachim Christensen is +120. I kind of see this fight going very similar to Luis Henrique's very first UFC appearance, where he weathered that early storm, similar to how we saw against Jonathan Wilson. He's going to weather that storm of Christensen. He's going to come on strong late, and he's going to score that TKO finish. Probably avoid betting on here just because we don't know what we're going to get out of Christensen, but I'm going to go ahead and put my prediction down. Luis Henrique de Silva, TKO round 2. Moving on, we have a very intriguing featherweight matchup between the number 12 ranked Hacran Diaz taking on Team Alpha Male's Andre Fili. Fili coming in on short notice here, replacing the injured Brian Ortega. Both guys are coming off losses. Diaz lost to Cub Swanson. That was back in Tampa, UFC on Fox in April. Fili, a KO loss, a highlight reel KO loss, I should add, at UFC 197 to Yair Pantera Rodriguez. A jumping flash kick, switch kick, to Pantera. Highlight reel performance of the night, no doubt about it. Diaz, a staple of Nova União in Brazil. That's the camp that produced the likes of guys like Renan Barão, Jose Aldo, Leonardo Santos, as well as Claudia Gadelha. For Diaz, he has extremely strong leg kicks, great jiu-jitsu pedigree being from Brazil. What else would you expect? He's a well-rounded guy. He has some big wins inside the UFC, has fought some of the best at 145. Fili, as we mentioned, Team Alpha Male in Sacramento, and interesting, reinventing this Team Alpha Male Nova União rivalry that we saw for years with Renan Barão and TJ Dillashaw, Uriah Faber. Good to see that the camps are going back at it again. Fili, he's a high-volume striker. He's a little bit unorthodox on the feet, causes problems. We saw that really impressive TKO finish of Gabriel Mogli Benitez back in November of 2015. Haven't seen all too much of Andre Fili's ground game. He'll be looking to keep it on the feet, I imagine, for most of this fight. For Diaz, I think if he avoids the big shot that any of those flashy kicks or big-time head strikes that Fili might throw, he should be fine here. My prediction, I don't think Diaz is going to get caught. I think he's going to grind him out. He's going to pepper him down with the leg kicks, work to get to the fight to the ground, and have that strong advantage there and get the win. Moving on, we have the first of two heavyweight fights we'll take a look at here. This is Shamil Abdurakhimov, and my apologies if I pronounced that wrong, taking on Walt the Big Ticket Harris. Both guys are coming off wins. Shamil defeated Anthony Hamilton. That was back in February of this year. Walt Harris, a second-round TKO finish over Cody East at UFC 197 in April. Current odds, Harris -105, Abdurakhimov -125, so pretty close. Might see a little bit more movement toward the even-up odds for a pick'em, but as of right now, the very slight edge to Abdurakhimov. I'm actually a big fan of Walt the Big Ticket Harris. I think he has a lot of potential considering his size, his athleticism, his coaching. He comes from one of the best camps in the world, American Top Team. I think he is a lot better of a fighter than his 1-3 mark inside the octagon would indicate. For Shamil, we haven't seen a lot out of him. He was finishing his UFC debut by Tim Johnson. Then he fought a very smart game plan against Anthony Hamilton. A little bit of a boring fight, a lot of fans criticized on Twitter. Stayed away from Hamilton, used his kicks and his distance striking. Harris, he's more of a counter striker. He doesn't necessarily push the pace too much, but he does have pretty crisp hands. We've seen some finishes. We've seen him drop guys inside the octagon. This fight, I think the guarantee in this fight is that it's going to go at least one round. Both guys are a little bit of a slow start in that I think Harris is going to look for the counter strike, and Abdurakhimov might not necessarily push the pace too early on. I'm going to give the edge in this fight to Harris. I think he'll be able to land more strikes, especially the head strikes, but I really don't expect it to be a wild heavyweight brawl. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight goes the distance. I think both guys are going to really try to fight a smart game plan, use their strengths, and keeping this fight on the feet. We'll see, though. Should be a good one. Moving down the Fox Sports 2 prelims, welterweights collide as Keita Nakamura taking on Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. A good fight here. Nakamura has been strong since his return. He has 2 rear naked choke wins in very tough fights. Those were against Li Jingliang and most recently Kyle Noak back in Sioux Falls at UFC Fight Night 92 in July. In between, a competitive decision loss to Tom Breeze, but showed a lot of potential in that fight. Took Breeze down on multiple occasions. Really good ground control there. Zaleski, also known as Capoeira, had a terrific performance his last time out. That was against Omari Akhmedov back at UFC on Fox in April, back in Tampa. Showed a lot of strong technical striking, but also extremely sound Brazilian jiu-jitsu when the fight would hit the ground. Capoeira, he's a former jungle fight welterweight champion, and he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt under the legendary Cristiano Marcelo. I like Zaleski to pull off the upset here. Capoeira currently sits at a plus 115 underdog to Keitaro Nakamura's minus 140 favorite line. Nakamura, I expect to score a few takedowns, but Capoeira showed some incredible defensive jiu-jitsu, especially with the leg locks and the scrambling. And I think he more than has the advantage on the feet in this one. I expect him to pick Nakamura apart on the feet and ultimately get that W. And I think we're seeing a rising star in the welterweight division. We got a fun middleweight clash of 2 veterans looking to get back on track. Nate Marquardt taking on the Barn Cat, Tamdan McCrory. Just when you thought Nate Marquardt was done, he comes back last December and knocks out CB Dalloway in the first round. But after that, then went back to reality, suffered another stoppage loss. That was to Thiago Marreta Santos back in May, UFC 198. The Barn Cat, McCrory, looked like a world beater since his 5-year hiatus return in 2014. Had the 2 wins in the first round in Bellator. 3 straight wins overall in his UFC return, submitted Josh Saman. That, though, came to a screeching halt in this past June, knocked out in the very first round, absolutely flattened by Krzysztof Jotko, who has been on a roll, but back in June in Canada, in Ottawa there, rather. A lot of folks are picking McCrory as the safe bet. He's a minus 225 favorite. Certainly that's the way I'd lean too, is McCrory by TKO. I think Marquardt is a little bit chinny, as Luca Fury would say. He's been hit quite a few times. He has quite a few TKO losses. But never count out Nate Marquardt. He is an extremely durable guy. He is still one of the most elite level grapplers on the planet, and I think he has the advantage in this fight if he gets to the ground. If he gets to the ground, Nate Marquardt can compete with anybody in the world. Betting-wise, I'd stay away, although Marquardt at plus 175, the gambler in me does, call that to my attention a little bit, but overall, I think McCrory's probably a safe bet, including him in a parlay as well. Might not be a bad option. McCrory by TKO, I don't know if it comes in the first round, maybe late in the second round, but that is what I'm leaning toward, and that will be my official prediction. Another light heavyweight showdown on the prelims here. Johnny Bravo Wilson taking on Juan Cutelaba of Moldova. Wilson, he's coming off a second-round TKO loss. That was to Luis Henrique da Silva, Frankenstein, as we mentioned earlier. That was at UFC 199 back in June. Wilson trains at Millennia MMA in Riverside, California. That's a very strong camp these days. Guys like Lorenz Larkin, Joey Merritt, the most recent winner of The Ultimate Fighter, Tatiana Suarez. Jason Gonzalez just made his UFC debut. Bellator staples, Syed Awad and Georgi Karakanian all training there. Wilson had an extremely impressive UFC debut, knocking out Chris Dempsey in the first round. Had a good first round against Henrique da Silva. Henrique da Silva ate all his punches, came back, and finished him in the second. Cutelaba, he's only 22, as we mentioned. He's from Moldova. His record currently sits at 11-2. showed a lot of good skills in his UFC debut. That was a loss to Misha Serkinov back in June in Ottawa at UFC Fight Night 89. My prediction here, it's pretty close, but I'm going to go with Cutelaba. I think he's a little bit more technically sound. He avoids the big power punches of Wilson, and he hits hard himself. I think he's going to get the job done here and pull off his first UFC victory. A heavyweight bout that's featured on UFC Fight Pass for this card. Cody East taking on Curtis Blaydes. Two of the younger heavyweights in the division. East sitting at 28 years old with a record of 12-2. Blaydes 25 years old, a record of 5-1. Both these guys looking to bounce back from their losing debut efforts in their UFC debuts. East, he was featured on Dana White's Looking for a Fight. He's the former Legacy heavyweight champion from Jackson Winklejohn in Albuquerque. He debuted back at UFC 187, as we mentioned earlier, a loss to TKO second round to Walt the Big Ticket Harris. Blaydes, a highly decorated wrestler coming out of Chicago. He had a losing effort in his UFC debut at UFC Zagreb, falling to Francis Gano, losing via doctor stoppage due to an eye injury. His eye was pretty much swelled completely shut. East right now sitting at a plus 170 underdog. He's a very crafty striker. He does have a wrestling background in high school, but I think in this fight he'll want to keep the distance, leverage his athleticism, and land some of those big power strikes. Blaydes sitting at a minus 210 favorite, and I'm a little surprised. I think that's a little bit higher. I think the odds, this fight is a little bit closer than the odds would suggest. For Blaydes, I know he wants to get that takedown and land some bombs from that top superior position. That's what we saw him do against Francis Gano, at least in the first round. He showed a lot of toughness. He did get hit by Gano, but he was able to get some of those takedowns, land some of those bombs from the top position. I personally have some high hope for Blaydes. Like I said, I thought he showed a lot of potential in his UFC debut. East certainly is no slouch. I expect Blaydes to be able to get that takedown and control and get the decision win here, but also would not be surprised if East was able to land one of those big strikes and put Blaydes away. Betting-wise, I really would probably stay away. But if I had to give my official prediction, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Blaydes by decision or by TKO from the ground and pound. And kicking off the UFC Fight Pass prelims, some women's bantamweights here is Kelly Faszholz taking on the newcomer Ketlen Vieira. Faszholz minus 120 favorite, Vieira minus 110, virtually a pick'em. Faszholz record 3-1. We saw her UFC debut loss to Lauren Murphy. Vieira comes to the octagon. This is her UFC debut, sitting at 6-0. Faszholz, as we mentioned, took that fight with Lauren Murphy back in February. That was extremely short notice, replacing the injured Sarah Moraz. She showcased some crisp boxing. She probably won the first round against Murphy, an extremely tough veteran. She impressed a lot of people, definitely faded a little bit later in the fight. Her ground skills were a little bit called into question here. Vieira, 6-0 as we mentioned, few submissions on her record, not much known otherwise, but she has been featured on many different prospect watch lists for that reason and that reason alone. With a lot of unknown between the two fighters, I'm going to give Vieira the advantage. I'll give her the edge to get that first UFC win, but the odds are so close. It's pretty much a pick 'em fight. I think it's a safe bet either way. Unless you have real strong confidence in one or the other, I'd avoid this fight on the card. That'll do it for us this week, folks. Really appreciate you tuning in. Please give me a follow on Twitter at TrademarkMMA. Be tweeting for the fights live speed. So look forward to hearing from you guys, and thanks again for tuning in. Let's go UFC Portland. Let's get it.